ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. We're talking college football, and it's preseason time. We're talking about the rankings. What do they mean? Nothing at all, but your guys are going to tune in for them. It gives us something to talk about through these summer months. Do we rank a team too high? Do we rank a team too low? But the man who will be joining me for the third season. This is our third college football season together. My co-host, Fresh. Fresh, how you doing, buddy?
Haps. I love it. We get into like late, May, early June, the summertime, talking about college football, getting us ready. SEC is, they're all getting their spoiled thing. Big Ten's doing their thing. Pac-12, Big 12. Everybody's kind of antsy in that weird period between end of spring practice and beginning of, fall camp. So it's a great time to talk ball and get us ready for the season.
Everyone else is antsy. I can barely get through our introduction here without stumbling over my words. So if you guys can see that I'm antsy right now, ready to go after this preseason ranking here. So it's great to be able to talk some college football again and get us going into the season. So just for people to kind of get some context with how we're doing this season, Fresh and I decided that we were going to do our top 25 again going into the preseason. But this year we wanted to make sure that we covered all the top 25. We actually ranked the top 30 teams in college football. And we wound up deciding on 5 teams that were also receiving votes or honorable mentions that were just outside that top 25. So we're going to start with them. We're going to go from 30 all the way down to 1. So these are our honorable mentions, number 30 through 26. And we'll be dropping them all throughout this year. Fresh, it's going to be a good group, man.
It's a good group. It's an exciting group. A lot of these teams had some ups and downs of last season, but, transfer portal recruiting, what can coaches do to develop the players, or what can players do for themselves to develop, to take it to the next level? How does the schedule play out? This being preseason, there's some hype around these teams. There's some, prosperity, some hope. And, where will they be come mid-September? Where will they be come, October, and so on and so forth? But this is where we think they're going to start the season out at, and marching forward, anything can happen.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's jump right into it. Our number 30th team in all of the Irrational Confidence preseason ranking is the Kansas Jayhawks. Last season, 6-7 on the year, 3-6 in the Big 12. Started off the year 5-0, and game day went to the big time matchup versus the TCU Horned Frogs. Great game there in October, losing that game 38-31. They wound up playing in the Liberty Bowl in December against Arkansas, and that game went into 3 overtime. So if you guys don't think like Kansas was legit last year, they're just Jayhawks, they're just a basketball school, and they had a fairly good year. So let's start with the Kansas Jayhawks here, Rock Chalk Jayhawk, and can they be more than Jalen Daniels? That's my biggest question, Fresh.
The first thing you got to look at the head coach. Lance Leipold, he won 6 national championships in D3 at Wisconsin Whitewater. Took a job with the Buffalo Bulls up there in the MAC. Took Buffalo to 2 MAC title games. So obviously he's taken programs, built them up, and won. And he's kind of building the same kind of traction here at Kansas. It's tough. You're gonna have, you aren't the darling of a recruiting aspect when it comes to college football as they are in basketball. But he's building it from the ground up. And last year you saw a lot of success early on. That 5-0 run. They played the game competitive versus TCU. Daniels got hurt and knocked out, and they had a rough stretch there in the middle without their quarterback. But I think with Daniels coming back and running back Devin Neal, the two of them are a 1-2 punch for that Jayhawk offense that really will let the entire team fuel behind that coaching staff that sort of put their brand on this team. But they're both healthy. This offense will be able to move and score at will, especially the Big 12 where defense sometimes can be a little limited lately. They're going to be the keys to this football team. They were the 4th best offense in the Big 12 last year in terms of yards per game with 437 yards a game, and the 5th best rushing attack with 183 yards a game. They scored 35.6 points a game, which was second in the Big 12. They were scoring with the best of them. They were putting up there with the TCUs, the Texases. They were scoring points. The defense, on the other hand, that's going to have to be a lot better this year because that defense was pretty putrid. They gave up 452 yards. I'm going to round up 452 yards a game, and gave up 33.8 points a game. That's worse both categories in the Big 12. If they can get any kind of defensive effort this fall, it'll put them in a situation to maybe get a couple of those breakthrough football games or those games they lost by one score, like that TCU affair. Maybe that turns the tide in this football game. And I think when you kind of look at the newcomers and what the new blood is coming into this program, you got four-star tight end Jaden Ham. I got a feeling he's 6'5", going to be a mobile impact player, probably play very, very often and early with this team, giving him a target in the middle of the field. And then you also look at the transfers. They had to hit the transfer portal hard. They went out and got offensive tackle Logan Brown from Wisconsin, and then D lineman Gage Keys from Minnesota, J.B. Brown from Arizona, Austin Booker from Minnesota, cornerback Demarius McGee from LSU, and they also added an extra running back, Dylan McDuffie from Georgia Tech. The defense was terrible. They lost a lot at the line of scrimmage. You go out there and get some defensive linemen to help supplant what you already have recruiting and developing. You go get a corner from LSU, and I'll tell you right now, we all should know by now, DBs at LSU, they're going to have some skill levels. This kid's probably going to be starting day one. You got to put the pieces in there. You let the offense build, and you get the confidence of last year, and they feel like maybe they left a little on the table against Arkansas. They had a chance to win that game going to 3 overtimes. They were right there the entire time. If this team can just take that next step, and I think that's what we're looking from Kansas this year. What can they do? Take the next step. They're not going to jump out and scare anybody. Everybody expects them to be competitive. It's not the one-win team the year before that comes in and gets 5 wins early on in the season, and people are like, wow, Kansas is back. Now your people are expecting to be competitive and be able to play there, and now you have to be able to take that target on your back, per se, and be able to build off of it. I think this football team, when you look at their schedule, they aren't going to have the pushovers. They got Illinois on the schedule. They have Texas, obviously, Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, Texas Tech, and Kansas State. Those aren't going to be easy wins. They've got to manage those 6 games right there at a 3-3 clip. If they can go 3-3 on that among those opponents, this team could really have a roadmap toward 7, 8 wins, maybe even luckily, maybe 9. This team has a chance to take that next step. Now they took a 1 to 5. Can they go from 5 to 8? That's the biggest goal right here. Can they take that next step and get them locked into a 500 season and above? At the end of it, I think the ceiling for this football team is about 8 wins. And I think the floor, the bottom, the worst they could possibly is 5. So somewhere, can they find ways to defensively get some stops late in football games? Can the team stay healthy? Can the ball bounce their way? You look at TCU last year, they had 6, 7 one-score football games, and they found ways to survive all of them and getting lucky bounces, making key stops, making a late touchdown there. Can Kansas find that momentum this year and get those momentum plays and be able to get some of those extra wins and turn those one-point losses or one-score losses into wins? I have a lot of faith in Coach Leipold. I have a lot of faith in this offense. I just want to see what they can do defensively. But I think it's going to be a fun, exciting season in Lawrence, Kansas, and what the Jayhawks can do in the Big 12. I'll be something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, Fresh. My question for Kansas, and I'll always ask some questions here. Can they win without Jalen Daniels being Superman the whole time? And that's really got to come down to it, because when we watch Kansas start on that 5-0 run, Jalen Daniels was playing out of his mind during that stretch. You're right. Devin Neal coming back is a huge boost for him. Over 1,000-yard rusher. That can be a quarterback's best friend. But the 2 guys that you're taking a look at, you're looking at Lawrence Arnold and you're looking at Luke Grimm on the outside as wide receiver. They got 92 or 96 catches together, over 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns between the 2 of them, both of them coming back. I think if Daniels can kind of sit back in the pocket this year, and he ran for 77 rushes last year. He took off 77 times. If he can kind of sit back in the pocket and deliver the ball a little bit more and turn a little bit more into a passer, I mean, you still want to keep that dual threat ability where if the pocket breaks down, you can take off, you can get out of trouble there. Yeah, it's definitely going to help them. But I need to see him take the next step as a passer, not just as a superhuman athlete that just does whatever he can when the game needs him most. Yeah, you still want to have that ability, but you want to take the next step as you were talking about it. I love their offensive line. I love their center right there, Mike Norvetsky, red shirt senior. The dude is a beast. He's going to be the leader of that offensive line. The dude's smart. He's going to call out. Don't be shocked if you hear his name be a top 3-round pick next year in the NFL draft. So if you're a team that's looking to replace the center, look at this name. Mike Norvetsky is a redshirt senior for Kansas. Watch out for him. I'm looking at this, Fresh. I went through their schedule. I'm kind of similar to you. I have a floor for them at about 6 wins right now. I'm looking at the first 7 games. The first 7 games include that date, week 2 versus the Illini. That is in Lawrence, Kansas. We're going to learn a lot about this Kansas team in the first 2 weeks of the season. Yeah, you're going to go in Missouri State Bears. You're going to probably put the boots to them. But then that week 2, when Brett Bielema come into Lawrence, hey, you get about 12 days or 10 days to prepare for that game. That's going to tell us a lot. You got week 3 against Nevada. If you're starting the year 3-0 and your bye is October 21st right now, there's 7 games prior. If you are 4-3 or 3-4, that's when we can start having that conversation. Okay, are we going to be able to see Kansas get to that 8-win spot? I got their ceiling at 8 wins. I don't see them winning the Big 12 here. It would take a Herculean effort on their end. They got some tough games, especially ending the season. I look at that game versus Texas Tech and K-State, but those are both at home in Lawrence, so watch out there. Things can get kind of crazy when you get into the plains of Kansas.
I mean, how cool do you think that is, though? If you come in, you get 1 win, and then 2 years later you're at 8 wins at Kansas. It shows you programs where they're at and expectations are completely different. If somebody wins 8 games at one school, that's a fireable offense. But if you start winning 8 games at Kansas in a 3-year span, getting it from basically nothing to 8, that's a huge accomplishment. That just shows that the building blocks are at the very bottom and building core up, which Coach Leipold has done. And it's something you kind of want to see deep down. You want to see that success.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Fresh, let's go to our 29th team. They're out of the Big Ten. It is the Illinois Fighting Illini, coming off of an 8-5 season, 5-4 in the Big Ten. They wind up going to the Reliant Quest Bowl, facing Mississippi State in that game. I don't think that they had a chance winning that football game after the death of Coach Leach. So they played their heart out in that game. It was an ugly game. It was a very sloppy game. But, Mississippi State was playing with too much emotion for that one, so a little tough there. They wound up finishing off 2022 with 3 losses in their last 4 regular season games. You take a look, they wound up losing to Michigan State, losing to Purdue. Both of those were at home. Then they traveled to Ann Arbor. They were winning that game most of that all the way through about the 4th quarter there. Won't bring up some things that happened in that game there, but Michigan winds up winning it, and it kind of has Illinois tumbling. So let's take a look at the 2023 version of the Fighting Illini. Lost a bunch in that great secondary, but they do have some nice things coming back here.
I mean, your quarterback's gone. You lose Chase Brown at running back. You obviously those 3 starters in secondary. But I think even the bigger loss is Ryan Walters, the defensive coordinator, is now the head coach at Purdue. How do you replicate that nation-leading, 12.3 points allowed per game and giving up 263 yards a game? That staunch defense is what really built the Illinois program. The offense wasn't world beaters. They weren't scoring 30 or 40 points a game. They were grinding it out, physical offensive line, manage the football game, let the defense be lights out. You've lost a core of your secondary. You lost your coordinator. How's that defense going to build up? They do have a stud in the middle, defensive lineman Jerzon Newton. I think he's going to be a first-team All-American. I have him very highly ranked. I think he's one of my first, high-level guys for all irrational confidence coming into the season. He's going to have to be the anchor of that defensive line for Illinois, but who else is going to build around him? How are they going to be able to make up that loss of those players, that coaching staff that's really kind of been picked apart? That's going to be the first big key. Brett Bielema has built a legacy on being physical, run the football, 2 tight ends, play great defense. He did it at Wisconsin, won 3 Big Ten titles, had a major clunker in Arkansas, but he's kind of putting the work back here at Illinois. Last season, though, it kind of worried me, and you brought it up earlier, the clunkers, the bad losses. The Michigan loss, I'm not going to worry about that. It's the Michigan State loss that was a clunker. The Indiana loss at the beginning of the season. You're at home to win the Big Ten West, and you lose to Purdue. Those clunker losses are what kill momentum in a program, are what kill anyone truly believing that you're actually ready to take the next step. And that's where this season is a crossroads for Illinois. You've lost a lot of your stars who got you to that level, got you that prominence to have you, quote unquote, back. Who's going to take you to the next level? Was that the highest they were going to go? Was the 8 wins last year and those clunker losses, was that the max this program is going to be at? Or can you hit a next gear? Can you get that 9th win? Can you get that 10th win? Can you go to Indianapolis and play for a Big Ten title? That's what we're going to try to see this year and how this makeup of this squad is going to carry on. I think there's some talent there, but who's going to be able to take them the next edge? They did improve at quarterback. So coming in this year, Luke Altmaier's coming from Ole Miss. He's left after they brought in 27,000 quarterbacks down there in Oxford. He's now coming in to try to revitalize this Illinois offense, get a little more downfield threat, a little more passing attack, because we've seen Wisconsin's offense is going to improve. They're going to have adults running the offense in Nebraska. Obviously, Michigan and Ohio State, they're lethal. Penn State's lethal offensively. You're going to have to score some points at Illinois. You got yourself a potential quarterback there. How do you expand the offense? How do you make up for losing Chase Brown in that ground attack and build going forward? This team is going to be Brett Bielema's legacy, good or bad, going forward. Are we going to get the Wisconsin Brett Bielema building a long withstanding period of time at Illinois in the Big Ten? Or are we going to get the Arkansas version now where you come with all the flash, but you can't live up to it? That's where he's going to have to guide this team, and Luke Altmaier. The rest of it's a big unknown. They really relied on all the guys who are gone. So we really don't know what to expect going forward from this Illini program. I will say, though, the key is a Penn State, Purdue, Wisconsin, Iowa. Those 4 games, they have got to somehow get 3-1 out of those 4. Do they lose to Penn State and beat everybody else? They avoid Ohio State and they avoid Michigan until potentially going to the Big Ten title game. But in this schedule's manageable, but you've got to go 3-1 out of those 4 to give yourself a chance to really make a threat and make a run. I think the ceiling for this team, if everything goes right and a lot of guys, step up and come from the shadows who weren't getting all the playing time last year and work off building up there in fall camp, I think the ceiling is 10 wins for Illinois. But on the other side, the floor is 6. There's just so much unknown. They could be a 6-6 football team. They could be a 10-2 team going to Indianapolis and playing for a Big Ten title. But it really comes down to, how does Luke Altmaier perform at quarterback, and how do they make up for all the losses and deficiencies on defense that are coming in this year? What does Brett Bielema do to keep this program going in the right direction? I'm actually very intrigued. And the Kansas game is going to be, I think, should be must-watch TV for everybody, because 2 programs on a trajectory. Are they both going up? One's going up, one's still paused, plateaued. What are we going to find out? There's talent here, but how can this talent be nurtured and developed to really take the next step in Illinois and Champaign?
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see what Altmaier does, man. I really think that's a great addition for the Illini this year. And he comes in with, it was a tough situation down there in Ole Miss. Like you said, Lane Kiffin was bringing in any quarterback he could find to play, to try out to have a new starting quarterback, even though you turn Jackson Dart. I think the biggest thing, though, for Illinois, if I'm talking about the positives on their side, is Reggie Love III coming back, who was the kind of the spellback for Chase Brown last year. 330 yards, averaging 4.6 yards a carry last year. Expect to see him have a bigger load going into the season. I think he could be a huge factor in it, letting Altmaier get used to this offense that they're going into. You take a look at Isaiah Williams on the outside there, 5'10" wide receiver there. He comes back, 82 catches, 5 touchdowns last season. I like him a lot. I really think he could be something real special there. And then on top of that, you take a look, but where are they going to get that big play thing? And that's Jacksonville's own Pat Bryant. 6'3" wide receiver. He's going to be a junior, 34 catches, 2 touchdowns last season. I think I'm waiting to see him take the next big jump there and be that real superstar on them. You're right, Fresh. This is a team of complete unknowns. Their schedule is interesting. It's not easy. It's not difficult. You miss both Ohio State and Michigan out of the East there. You get Penn State very early in the season. Now, Penn State, we think, is going to be a very, very good football team. But they have a lot of things to go through right now to start the season. And you get that game in Champaign. So if you go in, and we were just talking about with Kansas, if you got that week 1 game versus Toledo, that's no easy game. Toledo is probably one of the best teams in the MAC right now, but it is a winnable football game. You're going to be favored in that game. Kansas is going to, just as much as the Illinois game is going to tell us about Kansas, we're going to learn a little bit about Illinois week 2. If they can go down into Lawrence, get that victory, and they're 2-0 going in to the home game against Penn State, all of a sudden you could see the ball get rolling. What I think Illinois needs to do this year is they need that momentum. They need the momentum train to go for them. So all of a sudden you see, if they were able, and I don't think so, I think Penn State's going to be a heavy favorite in this game. I would say a 2-touchdown favorite at least. But it's the preseason, Fresh, so let's play the what-if game. Let's say Penn State
great that you
pulls that off. Or
it's great you say momentum, because if you look at last year's team, that Indiana loss, they were leading, and Indiana started getting some progress, and they just couldn't stop the momentum train the other way. The loss versus Michigan, momentum train going the other way. The loss versus Purdue, momentum train. They were in the football game, and then late they just couldn't stop the negative trends. That's something I think that's going to the coaching staff, getting with the players and getting them lined up and getting them focused mentally to be able to stay in the football game and play a full 60 minutes.
Right. And I'm fascinated to see, because there's a lot of, I think, trap games for them. And when I say that, I'm looking at Nebraska. We don't know what Nebraska is going to be. I don't think they're going to be great in year 1 of Matt Rule, but I know that they're going to be better than what they were. Wisconsin, I'm having a hard time betting against Wisconsin, but both those games are in Champaign. You take a look at the end of the season. If you can have like 6 wins or 7 wins going into the month of November, at Minnesota, Indiana, at Iowa, that's a tough one. End the season with Northwestern. You're looking at a 9-win football team. I have 9 wins as their max point here for this season. I know you went to 10. And I'll say this, I have a hard time seeing less than, I'd say, I have a hard time seeing less than 6 wins on their season. So I got them anywhere between, 6-6 and 9-3 this season.
Yeah, it's amazing how you would hate to see a team like this struggle after last year and the team that they had, but also kind of makes you worry, like, if you're an Illinois fan, was last year like the golden year of Illinois football, and did we miss our chance? And is that going to haunt you for the next 3 to 4 years, where you could have actually been there? You could have won the Big Ten West. You could have been a double-digit win team. Like, you kind of hope the team gets better, because if last year was what your hope was, and that was the crowning achievement, it's going to feel very empty.
Yeah, but I think this is where it comes into play, like having Bielman as the head coach there. I think that will really help the Illini to kind of stabilize the ship. It's not like someone whose hat was flash in the pan and then fell off a cliff there. I think that Bielman knows what's going to take to win and win consistently in the West. All right, Fresh, let's go to our number 28th team. It kind of felt weird ranking them at all the way down at 28th, and that's the TCU Horned Frogs. Let's get funky like a monkey, Fresh. Keep Fort Worth funky.
I think they're ranked rightfully so, maybe a little even too high. It's tough. This team won 6-7 games by 8 points or less. You're losing Max Duggan, Heisman Trophy candidate, finalist, Quentin Johnson, Darius Davis, Kendre Millar, Avila, the offensive lineman, Hodges Tomlinson, and a couple others in the defense. That's a lot of leadership and a lot of points, a lot of yards, a lot of playmakers who kept that team going. How does Sonny Dykes and that staff and that team get off the mat? Because the last time everybody saw them, they got steamrolled. They got beat in the Big 12 title game. All they are is Fiesta Bowl champions. They didn't win a national championship, and they didn't even win their own conference. And they lost all this talent. It's kind of, it feels empty, and it's like, where are they? Are we caring about them just because they were a national finalist, or are we putting them there because they're actually truly legit? I don't really know what this team is going to present. Everyone's going to be gunning for them. They had the ball bounce their way every single possible time last year, except for the national title game. Where are they going to get the breaks from? Where are they going to get the points from? Where are they going to get the yards from this season? That offense produced 455 yards a game and a conference leading 38.8 points a game. Where is that right now? How is that going to be replicated? I find it very tough to believe Oklahoma's going to be better. Texas is going to be better. Texas Tech is going to be better. Baylor's always going to give them fits. Where are they going to get those points and that yards from? The defense was okay, and the defense lost some talent. They gave 25 points a game. That was fourth in the Big 12. They gave it 385 yards a game, which was fifth. But where are they going to get those stops? And more importantly, where are they going to get the yards and the points from? That's the biggest question right now with Sonny Dykes. Is he a flash in the pan? Was this team just everybody on the same page and luck with them the entire time? Because, like I mentioned before, you had an 8-point win at SMU, an 8-point win at SMU, 7-point win at Kansas, double OT win versus Oklahoma State, comeback versus Kansas State in the regular season, 7-point win at Texas, the game-winning field goal was running on while basically clock was expiring at Baylor. All the situations don't happen to play out the way they do. This team is 8 wins maybe, and we're not talking about it. They're just a team. They had luck on their side. Can they keep that momentum in that? Can they keep it funky? That's the biggest it factor going forward this season. I'm not too sure. I could see him starting out 6-1 and even 7-0, but then the bottom 5 of the schedule is where we're going to know the truth of this team, because the front end of the schedule, not much of a challenge. The back end is where they get K-State, Texas Tech, Texas, Baylor, and Oklahoma. They can start at 7-0 and finish 7-5. It's going to come on Sonny Dykes keeping this team organized. Where's his true coaching prowess? I did an article about him. He's had some great success as a group of 5 guy. This year being his first year at TCU last year, and then at Cal he really struggled. What kind of coach is Sonny Dykes? Is he a great group of 5 coach? Got lucky last year and just an average Power 5 coach? We're going to find out what kind of team he puts together, because the Big 12, we've seen the past 2 years, been 4 different teams playing for the title, and it's a wide open thing. And I got a feeling Texas is going to be a lot better. Oklahoma's going to give you more fits. This is going to be tough for TCU to really rebound and keep the momentum as an elite team. I see they could finish with 9 wins as a ceiling, nothing higher than that. But they could also finish with 6 wins in the bottom and just barely make it through the first half of the year undefeated and then cank out the rest of the way. It's going to take a lot. The Big 12 is always crazy. I just want to. I want to see what kind of offense we get from Sonny Dykes and what type of players are coming back on this squad and how that will be a project for this football team. But I'm thinking anywhere between 9 wins and 6 wins for TCU.
Yeah, Chandler Morris is going to get another shot to lead the Horned Frogs there. And what are we going to get out of him? That's the number one question I have. Max Duggan was like one of the best stories in all of college football there. They do have some interesting transfers. They got Trey Sanders in the transfer portal from Alabama, JoJo Early, wide receiver from Alabama, Tommy Brockmeyer, another transfer, offensive tackle from Alabama. Those are 3 big-time transfers. And then on top of that, you take a look at a cornerback like Avery Helm, who's coming over there from Florida, another big-time guy. Caleb Medford leaves here. So you take a look at Chandler Morris. Yeah, there's too many unknowns for me, because I think that the fact that you're losing Quentin Johnson, you're losing Tay Barber, you're losing Darius Davis, your top 3 wide receivers from last year are all in the NFL now. So what is this offense going to look like? You take a look at someone like Kendra Miller. He's gone. So who's going to run the football? So it's so hard for me to sit here and be real excited about something, because there's so many things unknown. Is Trey Sanders going to be one of those guys that transfer from that top tier program and then just all of a sudden lights it up at a place like TCU? Maybe, maybe not. There's a reason that I don't think Alabama was holding on to him and saying you have to stay here, but maybe he needs a place like TCU. I'm looking at this schedule fresh, and a lot of people are going to, circle a couple of games here. Week 1 versus Colorado is going to be a marquee game in name only, really, there, just because Coach Dion is over there at Colorado. TCU making the national title game last year. People are going to have some buy-in. That's a 12 o'clock kickoff over there on Fox. Interesting game to start off the season. Then you take a look at Nichols at Houston. Houston was an 8-win team last year. SMU 7-win team. West Virginia, you don't have to go into Morgantown. You do have to go over to Ames, Iowa for Iowa State. I'm not yet, but Matt Campbell is really good when there's no expectations on him. So Iowa State could be tough. But again, like you said, that back half of the schedule is absolutely brutal. You got to go to Kansas State and Manhattan, Kansas in late October. Then you got at Texas Tech, the Longhorns come into town, the Baylor Bears come into town, and then you end the season going into Norman to face the Sooners. You're right there, Fresh. You could seriously see these guys have 7-0, 8-0, and then all of a sudden the wheels fall off. I think they're going to take a step backwards. There's too many unknowns for me. I'm going my floor. I actually have them missing a bowl game. I'm going to say my floor is 5 wins, but that's a lot of talent come from other programs. Though, just like you said with LSU and those guys who play cornerback at LSU on the depth chart, there's talent there. Same thing with people coming off of the Alabama program. There is talent in those transfer guys. So again, they could catch lightning in the bottle. And realistically, the difference between this being a 10-2 team is you got to pull 2 upsets out of K-State, Texas Tech, Texas, and Oklahoma. I think as long as you go 2-2 in those 4 games, this could be a 10-win team. So I have a huge range for this team, anywhere from 5 wins all the way up to 10.
I mean, we could be literally having the same conversation this upcoming season we did last year. When you get to late October, early November of TCU's undefeated. Are they really worthy of being a top 5 team? Are they that great? And then every week, every play, we're analyzing to see, are they truly that fantastic? And do they come out winning or losing? And you sort of playing that game of what if, or, man, they're okay. They don't pass the eye test, but their record says what they are. It has that kind of feel where if they do get that momentum going the right, and they somehow get some bounces late, we still have that exact repeat that we had in 2022.
Yeah. All right, Fresh, let's go to our number 27th team, and that is the UTSA Roadrunners. Well, this is a fun one here. We talked a lot about, me and you talked a lot about this. People forget they were 13-0 last year. 2 losses in the regular season, Houston and to Texas, and then they lose their bowl game, the Duluth Trading Cure Bowl, to Troy. They got Frank Harris. He's back for his doctoral campaign here.
I think so, yeah.
7 years. Hopefully he walks away with a degree out of UTSA after 7 years. He's fun to watch. 4,000 yards last year, 32 touchdowns. Maybe the best quarterback you guys haven't heard of. I mean, I don't know many people who watch a bunch of UTSA, but let me jump here real quick, Fresh. Fascinating. Week 4 at Texas, or at Tennessee, sorry. At Tennessee, week 4. This could be a really interesting game for the Volunteers if they're not ready.
Oh, I mean, if anyone's ever watched UTSA, where they've won back-to-back championships there in the Conference USA, but Frank Harris is a small lefty who can run, who's shifty. If you've ever seen old vintage Michael Vick from Virginia Tech days, I'm not saying he's Michael Vick, but the same kind of feel with the left-handed quarterback who can move, make throws on the run, be very shifty, cut back against the grain, make things happen, very explosive. He's that kind of a fun player to watch. There's a reason why he's had tremendous success putting up tons of touchdowns and tons of yards the past 2 years. And you mentioned the 4,000 last year and 3,100 years, the year before, and 59 total touchdown passes the past 2 seasons. The guy's instant offense. They have dominated, and they're going to the AAC now. They're moving from Conference USA to the American Athletic because they lost 3, obviously UCF, Houston, and Cincinnati are gone. They're filling that void with a bunch of other teams. So they already know half teams are coming with them. They kind of have that even understanding with who's following along with them as well. But the playing level is not going to be the upper echelon. They're going to have a chance to compete, and they're going to be entertaining. And they bring back a bunch of the players from this past 2 years of their 2 titles. So it's going to be a fun story. And what they're doing down there under Coach Traylor at UTSA is something to keep an eye on. Texas football is huge, and we've seen Baylor kind of rose up and TCU kind of rose up under the grass of the big Texases of the day when all the high elite guys went there. Everybody else who hadn't developed or wasn't getting recruiting found their ways to these smaller programs in Texas, built them up, and had success. You're seeing the same thing right now at UTSA. They've been working under the radar, slowly building a program, using all that Texas talent, and now they're ready to showcase it on a larger scale. The one thing it's going to be a big transition for this team, though. Offensive coordinator Will Stein, who's helped organize and orchestrate this offense, is now going to Oregon. So Oregon's offense is going to build Bo Nix for him. The two of them are going to have fun. How do they be able to develop and keep the offense going with a loss of an offensive coordinator who's helped guide them and cultivate this offense the past couple of seasons? Also, top receiver, Zachary Franklin, put himself in the transfer portals, back-to-back 1,000-yard receivers. Still technically has not signed with anybody or gone anywhere. Last I heard, he was in discussions or rumored to be going to Ole Miss. So he technically still could come back to UTSA, but has not officially signed anywhere. So keep that on your radar as the spring practice as we go through summer and into fall practice. Because if he does come back, that's another big explosive receiver returning. If not, the program's getting a great wideout. But he's definitely going to be missed if he's gone. And you look at the schedule. The AAC, I mentioned the teams are losing, but there's still powerhouses of Tulane, Memphis, ECU, and SMU are still there. So they're going to have competition, but can they be able to get a jump on them and use some explosive early to maybe supplant themselves in the conference? Harris ran for 600 yards too. He's not just that thrower. 600 yards, 9 touchdowns on the ground, but also they have 2 running backs who offer an element of that running game. Kevorian Barnes and Brendan Brady combined ran for 851 and 699 yards respectively, and combined 15 touchdowns. So they have a ground game between the 3 of them. And if you keep the game under control, you run the football successfully, you can slow those games down, let your defense get a rest, and find ways to milk it in the fourth quarter and win football games. And that's what they've done the past 2 years. That's what they're going to do this year. A nice balanced offense that hits and scores touchdowns. The defense, though, is going to have to be a little better, especially now they're playing against more explosive offenses. They can get some sort of a defensive stop. I don't think they'll get it versus Tennessee. They'll be in a good situation to really challenge the AAC title. They get Tulane the last week of the season. That might come down to whoever plays it, hosts that championship game. I think their ceiling is 10 wins. I don't think they're beating Tennessee, but the ceiling might be 10 wins. I think they can catch the people early. But I think the floor for them is 8. So they're going to be 8 to 10 wins somewhere in there. They have tons of talent. Just depends how the ball is going to bounce in their first year in the AAC. But Frank Harris is the story guiding this offense and really putting points on the board and maybe even contending for some high awards if he puts up a heck of a season.
So I'm going to say this here, Fresh. As long as Frank Harris stays healthy, is going to be how I'm going to lead this off. I only have 4 losable games on their schedule. Week 1 at Houston. Houston's moving to the Big 12. I think it would be a complete slap in the face for Houston to lose to UTSA that week after you make that move up to a Big 12. And I think it'd be something that we would be talking about in that Week 1 recap, that Houston, what the heck, you moved up to the Big 12 and then you lose Week 1. That game versus the Volunteers, fascinating game. But I give, UTSA a 3% chance of winning that game, 4% chance maybe. But, crazy things have happened. Who saw Texas A&M losing last year? And then I only got 2 other, losable games in my eyes there, Fresh. I got that week, that Halloween weekend, ECU is coming to San Antonio in the Alamo Dome. And then the last week of the season where the Roadrunners have to go to Tulane. Those are the only 4 losable games in my eyes as long as Harris is healthy there. I'm hesitant to say that their floor is 8. I mean, I kind of want to say that their floor is 9, maybe 10, but I also would say that their ceiling is 11. There's no way they've been Tennessee.
You think this team has a chance to really make a New Year's 6?
That's a great
as the group of 5 representative.
That's a great question. You put me on the spot here, and I'm trying to think who else is in that group of 5 representation. I mean, Tulane's got some nice pieces coming back.
Tulane, I think, is the biggest competition. Houston's no longer a group of five. BYU is no longer a group of five. Cincinnati, UCF, they're no longer a group
Right.
of five opportunities. It really does get you thinking on, does it come from the Mountain West? Who can put Boise State, maybe put some of them together out there, or Fresno State? But it's a
Great
platter right
question.
now for it's a platter for the AAC. And I think a discussion we can talk about more later on in the summer.
Yeah, let's wait till let's circle back to that question when we do our previews, because I like that question a lot. I'm really racking my brain. Me personally, I'm always got a soft spot for the ECU Pirates, so I'm always pulling for ECU to be that team out of the group of five. But yeah, I think you got a great point. I think that they could easily be that team that comes out of the group of five there. So again, I'm going to say their floor to me is 9 wins. I'll go up a little bit, 9 wins, and I'll say that their ceiling is 11. And then, if they pull off that 3% chance of somehow they knock off the Volunteers, all bets are off. Like that's
Oh,
just
no doubt.
crazy. So, all right, Fresh, let's go to our 26th team, the team that just about bit outside, missing the top 25. It's weird not to put this team in the top 25, but last season going 6-7, 3-6 in the Big 12. But the interesting thing is they lost 35-32 to Florida State, and both of us think Florida State's a really, really good football team. And that's the Oklahoma Sooners. Year 2 of Brett Venables. Fresh, I'll let you take first crack at the Oklahoma Sooners.
I mean, that last year, that defense under Venables was absolutely horrendous. The offense could score, the defense couldn't stop anybody. That's going to have to be the biggest adjustment. That's what his namesake is, building defenses. He's going to have to get that figured out and solved. That's not the biggest question for me, though. The biggest question for me is Dylan Gabriel at quarterback, or are they going to hand the reins over immediately to freshman Jackson Arnold? Dylan Gabriel, the dude is continuing to keep playing. Talk about someone who's on a doctoral program. But at what point do you, as a group, as a team, I want to call them a franchise. Now everyone gets NIL. I think we can still call them franchises. Do you give it to Jackson Arnold and let him just roll with it? Because obviously last year the offense was there, but they didn't win football games. Somebody's got to shake it up a little bit. So I think it's going to be an interesting conversation of how that plays out in that quarterback situation. Because Arnold comes in with a lot of fame, a lot of accolades from high school, and you're going to eventually have to hand it over anyway because Gabriel's been there for 30 years between there and UCF. But that's going to be the number one thing. How do they address the quarterback situation? At what point do they make that decision on who it's going to be? And if it's Gabriel and he struggles early, do they pull the plug and go to Arnold early on in the season for the betterment of the rest of the year? That's going to be the biggest question. The second one, how do you make up for losing your 2 offensive tackles that are starters? Marvin Mims, Eric Gray, a host of others. You lost a lot of veteran playmakers. Where does the rest of this receiver talent and this offensive playmakers come from? The depth chart, you're going to have to rely on a lot of freshmen, a lot of guys who do not have much experience to score points and move the football. That's going to require this coaching staff for Oklahoma and whoever's at quarterback to be on the same page the entire time and from the very start. Oklahoma recruits itself. And I think that's where we all need to get that and understand it. 80% of your recruits, they're going to see Oklahoma. I'm getting recruited by Oklahoma. They're going to be 4 stars or 3 stars depending, or maybe a fringe 3 or 4. They're going to go to Oklahoma. It's getting the elite players, and that's where the coaches have to separate and get the elite players. For the most part, you're going to have talent there at Oklahoma, but how do they develop them? How do they get the elite guys to play at their best? And how are they able to get wins where they should and not avoid the clunker losses? You averaged 474 yards a game last year. You led the Big 12. You had the best offense. You scored 32.8 points a game, which was 5th in the Big 12. This team was not shy to score points on the board. The defense, though, like we said earlier, was terrible. And what has Venables done in that past year? What has he done through spring practice? How is his team working through the summer? What's he going to do in fall practice? And how are they going to perform when the games actually matter? He got whitewashed by Texas last year. Absolutely throttled in his first ever matchup there. How do you go back to the Red River Shootout and avenge that? Do you show up and get beat down again, become, a waste? Or do you actually show up and get this team to play for you and make a statement? Because that game is where we're going to find out what this true programming direction is under Brett Venables. When they go in there to Dallas, if they lose, but if they lose in a hard football game, we at least know they're going to be tough and they're ready to play, like they did versus Florida State in the bowl game. If they go in and get slaughtered again, then we know that Venables has not had this team's pulse and this team is going to wash away. At that point, do you cut bait? You can't let Oklahoma fall too far away because eventually going to the SEC, you cannot become cannon fodder at that point. This is a big year for Venables and how he has a pulse in this team and where does he take these players and how do the players actually play up to their recruitable ability and how do they play up to the standards of Oklahoma football. You've got to make tough decisions now. You can't just play guys because they've been there forever or they've been a 3-year starter. It's not just your job on the line. It's the program standard and winning and the pride of all the alums. Look what happened to Miami. Miami's been terrible for a long time. Everyone keeps thinking, oh, the U is back, the U is back, the U is back. They're still terrible. All the former players stop caring eventually because it becomes the same situation. This thing, you don't want this to happen in Oklahoma, and that's where this kind of teeters in the balance right now with Brett Venables and this program. Where do you go? How do you get these players? Is it your quarterback? How do you fix the defense? Where do we get these things going forward and moving forward? You can't give up 30 points a game this year. You gave up 29.6. You can't do that. And the sad thing is, that was only 8th in the Big 12. That just shows you the defense of the Big 12. You're giving them 30 points a game and you weren't the worst. They avoid Kansas State, they avoid Baylor, and they avoid Texas Tech. That means you get the newbies, you get the Houstons, you get the UCFs. You have a chance against Cincinnati. Get Baylor. You have a chance to get some wins against some teams who are making that transition from, let's say, group of 5, elite group of 5, to the Big 12. Do you take advantage of those opportunities or do you lay down and get beat by them and then become just brushed aside? This has to fall in Oklahoma. Where's the pride of Boomer Sooner? How do you guys get it done? You can be really, really, really good and have a ceiling of 11 wins, but you can have a floor of 7. What Boomer Sooner program are we going to see this year? Are we going to see a forgotten, great team, or are we going to see a team that had a 1-year bump in the road and Venables is the right guy moving them forward? That's where I want to see what happens right now. Which quarterback, how does the defense get fit, and how does Brett Venables guide this team mentally between the ears to keep playing at the highest and the best they possibly can? It's a ceiling of 11 and a floor of 7 for me in Norman, Oklahoma.
Fresh, I know everyone's going to want to talk about Dillon Gabriel versus Jackson Arnold, and rightfully so. Dillon Gabriel, we thought going into last year, this was an amazing fit at Oklahoma. He lit it up when he was at UCF, but the same problem happened at Norman that happened to him in Orlando. He couldn't stay healthy. He gets knocked out of the game, and all of a sudden, the wheels kind of fall off. Jackson Arnold is an amazing freshman quarterback coming in, and it's tough to have the expectations for him to start year 1. But I think that because that's the conversation, something is missing with this Oklahoma team. And I think that if I'm Brett Venables and I'm trying to say, how can I get the Oklahoma alumni behind me? How can I get all of the support? How can I build up like everyone wanting to talk about Boomer Sooner football going into year 1 of the SEC? One, you're spot on. Right. The defense has got to be better. Brett Venables, you made your name. You got this head coaching job because of your prowess as a defensive coordinator. That's part 1. But part 2, I'm going old school. I am going old school, and I'm not going to sit there and put the football in the hands of my quarterback to start. I am going to turn around and I am going Javante Barnes, and we maybe were a year early because if you roll back the tape, and I went back and I looked at what we said about Oklahoma, there's an incoming freshman, Gavin Sawchuk. Well, we might have been a year early, only played in 2 games last year. But the kid had a really good game against Florida State last year. And Florida State played that game with nothing to lose. They didn't hold a bunch of guys out. 15 carries, 100 yards, a touchdown, 6.7 yards a carry. Oklahoma, run the football. You have 2 workhorse backs back there. I'm going thunder and lightning, old school type of running game, Fresh. I'm going Oklahoma is going to run the ball 40 times a game and take away that pressure that the quarterback's going to face. Now, is running the football 40 times a game and putting all of my eggs into the basket of these two running backs, is it good enough to win me the Big 12? Probably not. Probably not. I'm probably going to run into either Texas or maybe Oklahoma State, maybe K-State there. I don't know. But I'm going to tell you this, it's going to be good enough to get me to 9 wins, 10 wins. And everyone wants to see, hey, and then you know what kicks in though, Fresh? The most powerful thing for Oklahoma kicks in. Nostalgia. And if
I
I
thought you were
go,
going to say tornadoes.
well, that's true. That could be anywhere though. That could be Kansas too. But I'm saying the power of nostalgia kicks in. And all of a sudden, people go, Brett Venable, he gets us. We're a run-first football team. We're a power-eye football team. You know, they get back to thinking of the days of Adrian Peterson. They get back to thinking of that smash-mouth football that Oklahoma was known for. And I think that would buy Brett Venables a lot of time. I think that would get him a chance to figure out, okay, is Dylan Gabriel my best shot? Or is it going to be Jackson Arnold? And if it is Jackson Arnold, I'm going to need a running game to really take care of him. You know, they got the transfer. Interesting thing, they got the wide receiver transfer from Texas. I thought that was very fascinating. Brennan Thompson, the 4-star wide receiver who transferred over there. Interesting then, who's going to step up and take Marvin Mims' place? I got that question too. But Fresh, I'm looking at their schedule. If this team isn't 5-0 going into the Red River rivalry on October 7th, something's wrong. Like something's seriously wrong here. But then you take a look, they're off the week after Red River. You go UCF, Kansas. You got to go to Stillwater for Bedlam. But it's weird to me that Bedlam is November 4th this year. Like,
right.
I don't
I think they're trying to keep it away from, you know, both teams they don't expect both teams to be that good. They want to move it away from the spotlight.
I don't know. But then you finish off the year, West Virginia at home, at Provo against BYU, could be a trap game. But then we just sat there talking about TCU. We expect them to take a step back. That second half of the season, you know, you're looking at, could this be an 11-win team? Now, I'm going to tell you, if they're an 11-win team, I'm worried that they're going to be a paper tiger and they're going to be a paper champion. But you know what? It doesn't matter to the fans of Oklahoma. Like, you're an 11-win team. Great. Who cares that our non-con schedule is Arkansas State, SMU, and Tulsa?
Nope, nobody cares. And you know what? I like what you mentioned about getting old school and running the football. There's a certain Big Ten team that hasn't done it pretty, but they've been in the back-to-back college football playoffs. Jim Harbaugh, he comes up there and he's put 2 tight ends on the field. They're running the ball 40 times a game. They're taking the air out of it. They're playing great defense.
Right.
He's doing it his own way. Maybe you have to change the initiative and change the focus of the team to win football games. I don't care how you do it. Nobody cares how you do it as long as you win the football game.
Yeah. Can you imagine what, after going 6-7 last year, can you imagine like how that fan base would rebound if you're all of a sudden we're looking late November and Oklahoma's a 9-win football team? And here's the thing. I know Texas boat raced Oklahoma last season. I mean, it was absolutely like, I'm sitting there having flashbacks of the Rocky 3 where he's throwing the damn towel, like the guy's screaming from the corner, 49-0. I don't expect that to be 49-0 this year. That game's going to be closer. Now, I still will have Texas favored in that game, but it's not a crazy stretch to say that Oklahoma could win. That's a rivalry game. Oklahoma could win that game. If Oklahoma wins Red River, this schedule is set up to be an undefeated schedule. Like,
well, If they win that, they're in a great spot, and Sark might get fired before he gets back to Austin at the same time. So that game could be a big deal for everybody.
Yeah, that'd be great. If I'm Oklahoma, I beat my rivals, I'm 6-0, and I just made them fire their head coach. And then all sorts of craziness pops off at Texas. But I don't know. I got them. I'm going to say my floor for them is 9 wins. This schedule is really, really easy. I don't want to call it like there's another one that there's another place that I got something. I'm not going to refer to it just yet there, but this is a very, very easy schedule.
And just imagine if the SEC had kept Georgia on the schedule for Oklahoma instead of taking them off this past year.
It would have been
that would have been a lot tougher for them to survive, I think,
right.
Obviously. But it did them a service and actually remove the game from Georgia's schedule.
Right. And it really does help everybody out in this regards there. I'm looking at this 9-win season as the floor for Oklahoma this year. I would be more close to kind of lean towards that 10 number. But I'm going to play conservative and make sure, because I can't trust Venables to do what I'm saying to do. And maybe I'm wrong here. Who knows? But I'm going to say their floor is 9 wins, and I'd say their ceiling is an easy 11. And I think, if I was placing some money on this thing, I would really, if the over under is like 9.5 or 8.5, I would be hammering that over.
Okay, I like that.
So who knows? It's weird to have Oklahoma on the outside looking in the top 25, but it is what it is, folks. And those are our honorable mention. Hey, if you guys like this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Follow us along. Like, subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. Leave us that 5-star review because you guys are not going to want to miss any of our preseason top 25 that's coming out. And this is just the honorable mentions. We got so much more. We have 25 more teams to get through here fresh. I can't wait to dive into some of these teams. I'm excited. I'm real excited, especially to talk about 21 through 25. There's some really fascinating teams in that back half of the top 25 that can make some serious noise.
It's always like the back half of the top 25 where those are the guys that have the most volatile because they can make huge jumps or they can be bigger, big flops. But it really creates a great dive into it and really a lot of great storylines.
Absolutely. So make sure you guys are checking out. We're part of Spinnable Sports, so make sure you're going to spinnablesports.com. Yes, that's spinnablesports.com. I want to send a special thank you to our producer, Drew. Without him, none of this is possible. Make sure you're following us on social media. We are at 24,000 Twitter followers, so make sure you join in the crew. Follow us along, interact with us, because when we get to the regular season, hey, we let you guys decide one of the games each week we choose to preview going into the season. We got so much packed. I don't want to give it away. I'm excited. Fresh, if you can't tell, he's bursting with excitement right now. Look at the man's face. If you're listening, if you're listening to this, he's barely smiling. Got resting fresh face right now. So make sure you subscribe. Guys, I'm excited. We got a lot of stuff coming your way this season. It's going to be a fun one. Season number 3. Guys, it's going to be awesome.
Join the party, everybody. Spinnable Sports, Rational Confidence Podcast. Spread the word. Football season's here, whether you want it to be or not. You need a break, we got you covered.
Yeah. Guys, I can't wait. And we're a couple months away still. So let's do this.
With that, bye, y'all.